Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Marquardt, Michigan Republican Party here. Just wanted to touch base. We'll be getting started in about 5 minutes to allow any stragglers to get into the conference. If you are not hearing my voice right now, I will type this, but you should be hearing voice at this point. I will share my screen with you in just a quick moment, and we will proceed through the training. Again, we're going to get started about 7:05. I'm just logging the rest of the folks in. Thanks so much for your patience, and we will talk to you very, very shortly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started. I apologize. It took a little bit longer than I thought to make sure that you were all logged in, but I wanted to make sure that you all got credit for the training. You should be hearing the sound of my voice. If you cannot, look for the speaker icon or the phone icon. And you should also be seeing a text message from me. The way that that text message works is by clicking the chat bubble at the top of your page. The chat bubble is going to be used because all of your phones are on mute to ask me questions. I really appreciate the enthusiasm I'm seeing. I'm to share your enthusiasm about our chances on election day. If we could use that chat function for questions only, I would very much appreciate it. It pops up on my screen every time somebody texts something in. So unless there's a question or a problem, please refrain from using that for other things. Just letting some last folks in. I will be sharing with my screen with you momentarily in the next couple of minutes. Please settle in, get acquainted. Our training this evening should take about an hour, 45 minutes for the presentation, and then questions. I will please ask you to refrain from asking questions until the very end of the presentation, as I found that the majority of questions that you have to ask are handled or answered by the presentation if you let me go through it. So if there is a piece that you have not had a chance, or a question that you have not had answered by the end of the presentation, please let me know at the end, and I'll be happy to address it for the benefit of everyone. All right, if you all could help me out this evening, I would very much appreciate it. If you see anyone who types in, like Dan just did, that they can't hear anything, please copy and paste the text message that I just texted to everyone and repaste it for their benefit. It will allow me to focus on the presentation as opposed to making sure I'm responding to make sure people have sound. All right. Should be all set to go this evening. Let's, without further ado, head off. Thank you so much. First thing, I really do appreciate the sacrifice that you guys are making on Election Day by making sure that the polls are safe and taking part in our Election Day operations program. It is absolutely true that without you poll challengers, that Election Day operations wouldn't work. And there's a lot of very neat things here at the party that we do as a result of having poll challengers in the field. So with that said, we very much appreciate the fact that you are as dedicated as all of us are to this election cycle and have volunteered so graciously your time. We're going to cover a number of different things in tonight's presentation. We'll go over a brief overview of what Election Day operations is. For those of you who are football fans out there, it consists of two distinctly different sides. The first is ballot integrity. The second is GOTV and poll flushing. For those of you who, again, are football fans, ballot integrity is our defense, and we can think of GOTV and poll flushing as our offense. So those two different distinct sides are done simultaneously by poll challengers like you. So that leads us into how we do Election Day operations. Election Day operations is done by poll challengers through our proprietary EDO app and our paper reporting systems in conjunction with our legal hotline here in Lansing. Now, why is all this important? It's incredibly important if you take away one thing from this presentation, that you take away the fact that Election Day operations done properly win close elections and protect election integrity for everyone. Builds confidence in the system. We are here to make sure that everything is above board. And we are here to make sure that we push out as many Republican votes as we can so that we can push our nominee over the top and we can win up and down the ballot. So we talked about poll challengers. Well, what is a poll challenger? A poll challenger, according to Michigan election law, is a duly credentialed registered voter here in Michigan. So if we have anyone who is on the line who is not a registered voter in the state of Michigan, I need you to email me after the presentation and let us know, because you cannot be credentialed as a poll challenger in the state of Michigan if you are not a Michigan registered voter. You're not a candidate for elected office in the precinct that you're serving in. Now, you can be an elected official, you just can't be on the ballot in the precinct that you're poll challenging in. So if that applies to anyone, please feel free to email me after the presentation and we will move you to a precinct that you're not on the ballot in. And whose function is to monitor the election to make sure the proper voting procedures are being followed. That is what we are there to do. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. We are not there to not let anyone vote. We are not there to make sure that people don't vote. We are there simply to make sure that the election is conducted using voting procedures set up by the Secretary of State's office and executed by our beautiful clerks across the state of Michigan. Now, we have a tendency as folks both inside of the Michigan Republican Party, party activists, first-time folks, to use the terms poll challenger and poll watcher. Heck, I've done it and may do it in this presentation. So if I do, please forgive me. Poll challengers and poll watchers, while they may sound similar, and you may want to avoid using the word challenger because it sounds confrontational, you're going to want to refer to yourself as a poll challenger because that is what election law refers to you as. You are a poll challenger, and a poll challenger has specific rights in the state of Michigan that poll watchers do not. We also have requirements. Again, you have to be a registered voter. You can't be on the ballot. And we have a specific function. Now, poll watchers have no requirements. They have very limited rights in where they can stand. They are limited to a public area, and they get almost no respect from election officials. So that's incredibly important that we realize the distinction between those. And for those of you who lived through the 90s, one of my favorite shows was Home Improvement. Tim the Toolman Taylor, our tool time tip of the day: never refer to yourself as a poll watcher, always as a poll challenger. Incredibly important, very subtle distinction, but worlds of difference in the eyes of the people who you're going to be working with on election day. So let's talk about what poll challengers can do. Poll challengers can stand behind the voter registration table where voters show ID and receive their ballots. They can view voter records and IDs as individuals sign in to vote. That includes the applications that are handed across. They can use cell phones in the polling location as long as it doesn't interfere with the voting process. Interfering with the voting process is the first commandment in poll challenging. Thou shalt not interfere with the voting process. You'll hear me repeat that a number of times throughout the evening because anything that interferes with the voting process has the ability to get us removed from the polling location. So that is an incredibly important thing that we must heed. We're also allowed to track information in the polling location as long as it, again, doesn't interfere with the voting process. So the use of our app or paper lists, we are allowed to do that. We're allowed to view the voting machines. You're going to want to obtain permission from your poll captain or precinct inspector or precinct captain. I'll use those terms interchangeably this evening. You may hear me use the word election inspector as well. Those are also synonymous for people who work the precinct. You'll be able to view sealed envelopes and the numbers of those seals at the end of the day, the bags which contain the ballots, and then we'll be able to read the tallies of the tickets at the end of the day that will let you know how many people voted in that precinct and in aggregate who they voted for, so you can call in those election results at the end of the night. Let's talk about some things that poll challengers can't do. We can't talk to voters. Number one rule, can't talk to voters. It's actually going to be on your credential. We, again, don't want to speak with voters because of the fact that it might be construed as interfering with the voting process. We can't touch any voting materials. There are well-intentioned clerks and election inspectors out there that will allow you to go through and to review the poll books or the voting receipts to see if you missed anyone. They are well-intentioned and again, they mean well, but that is against the law and we can't do that. So I don't want anyone touching any of the voting materials. That includes poll books, computers, voting receipts, any of that information, ballots, all of that stuff is hands off. So we can't interfere with the voting process in any way, size, shape, or form. Again, that's something that's kind of the first commandment. Thou shalt not interfere with the voting process. We don't want to be disruptive. Speaking on the phone is a good way to be disruptive of the voting process. You're going to want to, if you have to make a phone call, step outside the polling location. You can't record audio or video in a polling place. Please cover the lens of your cell phone. We found that the circular Band-Aids that come in the really bright colors are a really good thing to put over the lens of your camera. They have a tendency not to stick to the lens itself, and they also are very conspicuous so people can see that the lens on your camera is covered. A little piece of tape will work as well, but try and be conspicuous about it so that they know we're following the rules. All right, we're not there and we cannot prohibit any person from voting. What we can do is obtain information in the case a ballot is challenged in a court of law, in the case of a recount. So again, we want to have great information, but we are not there to prohibit any person from voting. We're not to intimidate voters. All of those things are things that we are not to do as poll challengers. We're not allowed to observe voters while they're in the process of voting. In fact, I would recommend that you stay away from the voting booths completely. The one possible exception in that is if you see someone who has left campaign literature in the polling booths. At that point, I would ask you to talk to the precinct captain and have them go check the booths to make sure that there is no one in those booths or there is no literature in those booths. We also can't assist voters at any point during the process. Voters can be assisted, but it's not by us. They're assisted by precinct workers, and we'll be able to walk through the process for that in a little while. Now, when in doubt, your first step is to ask the poll captain or the election inspector or the precinct captain, all used interchangeably. If you have a question, listen to that person, be kind to them. Kind of a best practice is to potentially bring donuts or coffee if you're available or if you're able to the voting booths or to the polling location on election day. It tends to go a long way to create a relationship that will work for you guys throughout the day. Now, if a poll captain prohibits a challenge, that issue is over. You're going to want to make sure that you get reason for it so that you can note that information in the app and send it back to us. But you're going to want to listen and not argue with poll captains because you're not going to win that fight. Make sure that you call in to us because we are able to take that with either lawyers or with some of our staff here, kind of to the next step if something is truly an issue. let's talk about our defense side for a little bit. Ballot integrity, much has been talked about this election cycle. Let's go over how we maintain ballot integrity on election day. Part of what we do on election day is maintaining the integrity of the ballot. That's the reason that we're there. How we do that is accomplished through a number of pretty simple steps. We're going to want you to check conditions at polling locations at both open and close, document any voting irregularities during the day, and we'll get into specifically what to look for. We're going to want you to challenge ballots where warranted, and there are 4 specific statutory reasons to challenge a ballot. Again, we'll cover those in just a brief minute here. We'll observe absentee count boards where appropriate. Genesee County is a big one, also the city of Detroit and Pontiac, but there are isolated other areas throughout the state. If you have an absolute want to go to an absentee count board, chances are we've got a spot for you, so let us know. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to seek legal help when necessary. Incredibly important. So one of the things that we do is check conditions at polling locations at both open and close. One of the things that you're going to want to observe is the name of the head precinct worker, the voting machine serial numbers, and the number of votes at the beginning of the day. It should be 0. If it's anything other than 0, you're going to want to ask the poll captain why it's anything other than 0 when you arrive at the beginning of the day. And then you're going to want to call that in. The number of voting booths, where the facility is handicap accessible, where election instruction posters displayed. These are all things we're going to want you to check. And they're all pieces of information that our app will prompt you to collect. Now, it's wizard style. So when you go through the app and you select open a precinct, you have to enter all of that information. If there's a piece of information that doesn't work or is not applicable, put NA, but you will need to enter something in all of the boxes. Provisional ballots. I'm not going to get deep into the weeds. What I want you guys to know about provisional ballots is that they are not issued like regular ballots. Provisional ballots are a tool that is used when someone is not in the poll book. If there is a provisional ballot that is issued, or there is someone who comes up who is not in the poll book, we want you to take note of that situation. We want you to know what the reason was, how it was resolved, and if there was a provisional ballot issued, to enter that information in the throughout the day category on the report section of the app. At that point, you're going to want to call us and let us know what the situation is. Reporting a problem during the day. Some of the situations that we're going to want you to report are jammed machines, voter ID not being checked, campaigning in polling locations, and that takes a wide variety of forms, and we'll go in and go into some examples. Ballot supply issues. If someone runs out of ballots, we're going to want to know about that immediately. Any provisional and or challenge ballots, we're going to want you to note through the app and then also call us afterwards. Voting beyond legal hours, we're going to want to make sure that we keep the polling location hours to just their legal limits. In some areas, if there's a long line at 8 o'clock, you're going to want to go with mutually with your precinct captain, identify and agree on who the last person on line at 8 o'clock was, and then make sure that that person is the last person to vote. Anyone who is in line at 8 o'clock is entitled to cast a ballot. No one who is not in line at 8 o'clock is entitled to cast a ballot. We also want to know about any regular ballot issued to someone who is not in the poll book. Again, those provisional ballots are something that you're going to want to be on the lookout for. Reasons to challenge a voter. The challenge process that we talk about for a voter or a ballot is incredibly rare because of the following information. Under Michigan law, you have to have good reason to believe that the voter is not a true resident of the city or township, has not yet attained 18 years of age, is not a United States citizen, or did not register to vote on or before the close of registration for the election at hand. Now, absent personal information or personal firsthand knowledge, you would have to have a disagreement between their ID, their application to vote, whether the address is correct or not. There has to be some disagreement between the poll book and the information that they've put forward for this to be a situation. Again, it is incredibly rare to challenge a voter, but if it does happen, this is the process to have that happen. You'll challenge a voter by telling the poll worker or the precinct captain, "I'd like to challenge this voter." That is the magic words. After the challenge is made and accepted, the challenge person will take an oath. After the oath has been administered, the precinct chairperson or designated election inspector may question the challenged voter. Now, election law stipulates that questions be confined to the person's qualifications as a voter. Citizenship, age, residency, and date of registration are all questions that would be important. Now, the challenged voter is permitted to vote a specially prepared challenge ballot. Most often, that is a ballot that has the stub ID written on the back in pencil, that number, and then covered over with tape. That's how they're generally prepared. If the answer is given under oath, prove that he or she is qualified to vote in a precinct or in the precinct. Now, the challenge voter may not vote. They may not be issued a ballot in the instance that they refuse to take the oath, or they refuse to answer any questions under oath that are pertinent, or through those questions they are found not to be qualified to vote. So those are the three circumstances where they would not be issued a ballot. Again, in any one of these scenarios, whether the challenge was accepted or not, and the precinct worker has the ability to not accept the challenge. We're going to want you to call and let us know what the situation was, as well as follow the challenge voter process in the app, and I'll show you where that's at. It's under the reports tab for every single ballot that is challenged. Now, it is very, very rare to have voters be challenged or ballots be challenged. It does happen. This process is what we'll use. If it does happen and the challenge is accepted, a complete record of the challenge must be entered in the challenge voters page in the poll book. What's important to note in that instance is this is the clerk's record of what happened. We want information in the event that the election were to go to recount of what we saw happen. So you're going to want to enter all the information that's on the screen here at the bottom in the challenge ballots or the challenge voters section of the app. All of that information then comes from our point of view and is able to be searched and admitted into a court of law. First of all, or most of all, call the hotline. If you've got a challenged situation or you're concerned about something that's happening, call in. We'll be happy to give you guidance on that front, and also let you know whether this is a situation where a challenge is warranted or not, especially if something is happening again and again and a polling worker is not admitting the challenges. We're going to want to know about those things. So anytime you have a challenge or a question on a challenge, bring that information forward. Now, reasons to challenge a process are much, much more common. Now, reasons to challenge a process could include anything that is at odds with what you're being taught in this training. Perhaps if voters are not being asked for their ID, all voters should be asked for their ID. If campaigning is happening inside a polling location. If a single election worker as opposed to two election workers is assisting voters, we'll go through that circumstance in a minute here. If literature is left in voting booths, if you as a challenger are not allowed behind the table, it's pretty hard to do your job if you're not allowed behind the table. It's election law states that challengers shall be allowed behind the table. Any challenger that's handling election materials. Now, obviously, none of our challengers will be handling election materials. It's incredibly important that we don't do so. If there are challengers from the Democratic Party or any other challengers from other organizations, and it's possible that they may be there, we just want to make sure that everybody's playing by the same rules. Nobody should be handling election materials except the election inspectors. And anytime a voter not in the poll book is issued a regular ballot. So you've all seen ballots and you'll see many ballots issued. Someone will hand their ID with their application to vote. They'll compare it to the QVF. The signature will be correct. The addresses will match, and they'll queue them up to get a ballot. Voters who are not in the poll book will look very different than that. They will have to either sign an affidavit or go through their provisional ballot process with a secondary check of ID. If you are seeing something that is different than your normal process for issuing a ballot, give us a call. Let us know what's going on. Let's go through some specific, or after we go through how to challenge process, we'll go through some specific examples of things so that you guys are armed with a good, thorough knowledge of what should be happening and how things should be happening. The first thing you're going to do when you challenge a process is to inform the precinct chairperson that you have a concern about their process. Cite the process issue you have a concern about and use SOS materials, which are provided for you in the Election Day Operations app, to show the precinct chairperson the correct procedure. We actually use Secretary of State prep materials and their PDFs. They are the authority on how elections are to be conducted in this state. So we use that material and we can show that to people who may not have the correct procedure down. Most importantly, be polite and listen to the precinct chairperson's explanation. It's very, very possible that you don't perfectly remember this training. It's very, very possible that their understanding of an issue might be different than yours. Long story short, there are possibilities for either the clerk to be doing something not quite correct or your understanding of something to be not quite correct. In either instance, listen to the precinct chairperson's explanation for what's going on, and if it bothers you or it still bothers you or you think that it's still not right, call us and find out what's going on. Very important for you to call the hotlines. You are our eyes and ears in the field. That will allow us to get you timely answers about what the appropriate procedure should be so that we can step in and take action, whether it's a call to the clerk or a call to the county clerk, or to send a lawyer in to explain whatever the process might be that's not being correctly done. things we want to know about. We're going to go through some specific examples, and I do see questions coming in from Don and Carrie and Matthew Rockwell. I will get to those. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation. I don't want you to think you're being ignored. We'll get there. I'll scroll back up and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. Photo ID, very important thing to note. Every voter must show photo ID or sign an affidavit attesting that they do not have a photo ID. If they have a photo ID and refuse to show it, they shall not be issued a ballot. However, if they do not have a photo ID and they sign an affidavit attesting that they don't have photo ID, they are allowed to vote a regular ballot. Now, acceptable forms of photo ID include the following: Michigan driver's license, another state's issue driver's license, a federal or state government issue ID, which include potentially a CPL, a U.S. passport, a military ID, a student ID card from a higher education institution, or a tribal identification card. All of these things would be acceptable forms of photo ID. Now, when a photo ID is handed across, you're going to want to check that the name on the ID matches the name on the QVF. You're going to do this by looking over their shoulder and making sure that the ID and the poll book match. It doesn't have to be exact. Obviously, Jim for James, Dave for David, Tony for Anthony. All of those would be valid matches. They don't have to be exact. If a digital signature is available, the election inspector must compare the signature with the application to vote. So if you're seeing digital signatures in the electronic poll book, they should be comparing those signatures. Now, if a voter did not bring or does not possess photo ID, the voter can vote by signing the affidavit of voter not in possession of picture identification. All voters who do not have ID must sign this affidavit. So if someone comes in and does not have an ID, they will be signing an affidavit. If they do not sign the affidavit, they do not get a ballot. Now, if they do sign in the affidavit, they are allowed to write or to prepare or to vote a regular, unchallenged, non-provisional ballot. We cannot challenge a voter simply on the basis that they do not have an ID if they've signed the affidavit. We must have an independent basis for doing so, which includes those 4 statutory reasons for doing so. Again, an address mismatch, the signature is way off. They mess up their birthday. Something of that nature would have to be incorrect. There would have to be some disagreement between the poll book and the person who is applying to vote for an independent challenge to be made. All right. Campaigning in the precincts takes a lot of different forms. I'm sure that you all have seen signs at polling locations. That's absolutely fine. They just need to be 100 feet away from any polling place entrance. Some of the more subtle forms of campaigning in polling locations are people dropping a stack of lid on the check-in table. That's not allowed. Candidates hanging around inside a polling location, shaking hands, again, not allowed. Volunteers handing out literature right next to the door as people go in, again, not allowed. Something that might surprise you, we're not allowed to bring campaign or wear campaign material, including I've got a Michigan Republican Party jacket from the bus tour a number of years ago. That bus tour jacket has the Michigan Republican Party logo on it. I was asked to take it off at a polling location, and I complied a couple of years ago. So we had a question the other night: am I allowed to wear a Trump pin? No, absolutely not. Flags, absolutely okay. But anything espousing a candidate or issue or party is something that you shouldn't be wearing to a polling place if you're going to be a poll challenger. And no one else should either. So if you see someone who has a Hillary shirt on that is walking into the polling location, bring it to the attention of the precinct captain. If you see anybody leaving literature on this on the check-in table, again, bring it to the attention of the person who is working the precinct. Precinct opening and closing. On election day, the polls shall open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. We want to make sure that, again, that polls read 0 at 7 a.m. and at 8 p.m. The polls close. Again, use that best tip that we talked about earlier. That tip is to make sure that you go, if there's a line on election day in the evening, right around 10 to 8, make sure that you walk out there at 8 p.m. with the precinct captain and mutually agree on the last person in line. That anybody who votes beyond the mutually agreed upon last person in line, and I would pick a piece of clothing, the guy in the green hat, the guy in the brown sweater, the guy in the white Nikes, whatever the situation might be, identify a piece of clothing or identify a trait about that person and mutually agree on that this is the last person in line. Anybody who votes beyond that person, we're going to want to note their ballot numbers. We're also going to want to challenge every one of those folks and call immediately if they're allowing folks to vote after 8 p.m. Again, we want to make sure that the rules are enforced uniformly and across the board, and they are enforced everywhere equally. Machine jams or malfunctions. If you have a tabular machine that has a jam, the election inspector may open the machine and clear the jam after announcing that they're opening the machine. If an election inspector announces they're opening the machine, probably important that you pay attention to what's going on at that point. If a machine jams at any point, you're going to want to make a note of that, of the time and how the issue was resolved inside of the app or on the paper. You want to call the legal hotline immediately if the jam cannot be cleared or if the machine continues to malfunction. Running out of ballots. If a precinct runs out of ballots, make a note of the last ballot number that was given out, what time the shortage occurred, and what the response was, and then call the legal hotline. Pretty straightforward. Again, you guys are our eyes and our ears in the field. I do really appreciate that, and I know that everyone in this building does as well. Now, if an election inspector refuses to allow challengers, I assume that this will happen right out of the gate. Hit that election hotline. It will be on the credential that you'll be emailed within the next few days here, along with your precinct assignment, your PIN, and your login name for the app. If they are refusing to allow you to stand behind the table, or the table is set up in such a way that you cannot stand behind it, you're going to want to call that election hotline that's going to be on your credential or in the app, and let Stu and I know about it so that we can make a call to the county clerk and get that situation taken care of. We've made reach out calls to all 83 county clerks and a number of the local clerks to let them know that we may have challengers in the area. We've got a pretty good relationship with most of these folks. So if you do run into trouble, be polite, figure out what the situation is, inform the precinct captain that you have a right to be behind the table. And if they simply do not allow you to, give us a call and we'll make sure that happens. Instructing or assisting voters. Again, we as challengers cannot instruct or assist voters. Now, if a voter requests assistance, two election inspectors professing to be of different parties may assist that voter. So anytime a voter needs assistance, there are two election inspectors that are supposed to do so, professing to be of different parties. Election inspectors may not suggest to a voter how he or she should vote. It is very important that they don't do that. If you see any of that, let the precinct chairperson know and then give us a call. What they can do is provide help on process, how to connect different things, that type of thing. That type of assistance is what they need. If anything other than is happening, a single election inspector is helping assist someone, or you're seeing anyone suggest to a voter how he or she should vote, you want to make sure and you call us. Absentee count boards, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on. Unless you're in Genesee County, this is probably not going to be applicable. But absentee counting boards, you'll observe the opening and counting of absentee ballots. They're different from polls in the following ways. Once you enter, you cannot leave until polls close. Phones are not permitted and are usually taken. There's one challenger permitted per AB count board as opposed to two per political party in normal polling locations. And you'll want to bring lunch or dinner and something to drink because it's going to be a long day in an AB count board. The last part of our defensive program is seeking legal and app help. I probably said it 100 times tonight. Call the hotline. When in doubt, call it. We have lawyers and tech support for the app standing by to answer questions. If something doesn't seem right, it's always best to call to find out for sure. Normally a pretty quiet day. Elections in the state of Michigan are very well run across the board. We've got a great group of clerks across the state. We don't anticipate having trouble. The last few general elections and primary elections that we've run have been pretty quiet days. But if something doesn't seem right, call the hotline. It's always best to find out for sure. Now that we've covered a good nuts and bolts understanding of how things are supposed to operate in a precinct and some things to look for, let's talk a little bit about our get out the vote and poll flushing operations, because those are the offensive side of the ball, and I want you to have a thorough understanding of what you're doing on that side. Now, this is something that is happening simultaneously while we're watching for election irregularities. It's happening at the same time. We're checking people off. Now, GOTV and poll flushing. Poll flushing is the act of counting our votes as they come in. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Once we know which voters have cast ballots, we can begin the process of sending last-minute reminders to vote. Pretty simple concept, but it takes some pretty complicated technology to make it happen. In two of the cycle's closest races, last cycle's closest races, precincts we flushed in were shown to outperform those where we did not poll flush by an average of 14%. Now, what that means is in the areas where we made last-minute reminder calls through the app and on paper, we were able to turn out 14% more of the voters that we need to win than in areas where we didn't. Those numbers start adding up, both in the 91st district and in Senator Margaret O'Brien's race. Those were both areas that benefited from poll flushing that was done out of this building in 2014. Long story short, we know this works. We know that it works part and parcel with our defense program to make sure that these elections aren't close enough to ever go to recount. So we want to make sure that every Republican ballot that has the potential to be cast gets out. Now, how does it work? On election eve, we pull a final list of all the votes we feel we need to win. We remove absentee ballots that have already been returned and remove those from the list. Now, on election morning, when polls open, volunteers arrive both here at MRP and across the state at polling locations and begin checking off voters. Our MRP War Room is open to field both legal and app questions throughout the day and to take the results of paper poll books. Now, all day on election day, teams of volunteers report who has voted both via the phone for folks who are voting on or are checking off people on paper and in real time via our election day operations app. While we're doing that, there are calls and knocks that are being made all over our state to remind people to vote. What it allows us to do as you check people off at the polls is to remove people from both our call and our knock universes to make sure that we're using time efficiently on election day and that we're only talking to voters who have not voted yet. Now, it's never going to be perfect. We're always going to miss a couple of folks here or there. That's not something I want you guys to be too terribly worried about. If you're either at a polling location or if you're making the GOTV calls and you get somebody who has voted. But every voter that we remove is one phone call we don't have to make that we can then in turn make to somebody who has not voted yet. Now at about 3 p.m., really last minute reminder calls and knocks begin. We will refresh data throughout the day. But really by 3, we've got a pretty good idea of who voted in the morning and who we really need to move to try and get out that evening. Now at polls close, calls and knocks will continue until that point. If you are on a closing shift, we are going to want you to hang around until the ticket, the piece of paper that is printed by the machine at the end of the night, is signed by the precinct inspectors, and we're going to want you to call those results back in again to the number on your credential. Incredibly important that we get results from the precincts you're in so that we can feed them into our database and know how we're doing across the state. Now, what to expect as a poll challenger? Expect to attend multiple trainings. This is probably the 7th training we've done so far. Expect to attend a couple of them. It's impossible to get all of the information and feel comfortable with it in one sitting. So we offer multiple trainings at 7 p.m. We're going to meet again on Thursday, and then again on Saturday, and then again on Monday. Those trainings are critical for your understanding of how this works. So if you don't feel that you've gotten every piece of information you need, or you feel like you need a refresher before Election Day, please feel free to sign up for an additional training. We're happy to have you. Expect to work at least one 6-hour shift on Election Day. For some of you, you've signed up for 2 6-hour shifts, and we thank you for that. You guys are absolute heroes. Not all heroes wear capes. Some of them stand in polling locations on election days. So expect also to be challenged on why you're there. By attending this presentation, you probably have a good deal more knowledge in some instances than some new poll inspectors or poll workers. Don't be a jerk about it, but at some point you may have more knowledge than the person who is working as a poll inspector. Just let them know what the situation is. Be polite. Point out where things may be in conflict with this training. And if there's an issue or if it continues to be a problem, give us a call and let us get involved. You're not there to be the enforcer. You're there to be the eyes and ears. Let us deal with that and let us deal with any confrontation that has to happen. And I know this sounds corny. This is the second corniest line of this entire presentation. Expect to be the difference in this election. It is absolutely critical that we have poll challengers, both on the ground in our target precincts and in areas around the state where we need to make sure that the election is going correctly. I don't have a crystal ball on this election cycle, but I can tell you from being on field staff in 2010 and fighting in some of these same precincts and state house races, and with how tight the polls are getting, that you will be the difference in at least one state house race. You may be the difference between winning and losing the House seat. You may be the difference between winning the House majority and losing it. You may be the difference between Donald Trump carrying the state on election night and Donald Trump losing the state on election night. It's incredibly important that you guys do what you do, and we are so grateful that you're there. Volunteer roles. We've got a number of different volunteer roles, and I will go through them just so you have a good thorough knowledge of what we're doing. We have attorneys that will be roving the area, both here and in Lansing. Everyone will be credentialed by the Michigan Republican Party, so you will know who our roving attorneys are. We also have War Room volunteers, which take incoming phone calls here in our Lansing headquarters, make sure that they're routed to the proper places. We have Get Out the Vote volunteers across the state. who will be making phone calls and knocking doors to make sure we turn out every Republican ballot. And then we have poll challengers like yourself who are incredibly important and nothing happens without. So we do, again, thank you so much for being a part of the training. This is a little bit of inside baseball. This is the War Room in 2014. You might see some folks in the War Room. We set up a tremendous amount of temporary infrastructure to make sure that we can handle the incoming call volumes, as well as report all the paper poll books and make sure that works with all of our other technology in real time. It is a tremendous endeavor. I show it to you guys so that you have an appreciation that we take this very, very seriously, and that this all depends on the work that you guys do in the field. To review what we've talked about so far this evening, and then we'll get into the app, and then I'll answer some questions. Election day operations consist of both ballot integrity and poll flushing. Again, our defense and our offense. Ballot integrity ensures a fair election. Poll flushing makes sure that every potential Republican ballot's cast. Pretty simple stuff. A credentialed poll challengers perform both of these critical functions simultaneously through the proprietary EDO app that we've got for you, as well as on paper if that is your preference. EDO is proven to win in close races. We talked about it in 2014's closest races. I'm not going to say we won those races because the candidates won those races. But what I will say is there's at least one vote in each of those races that was probably protected or flushed by our folks, because we did a tremendous amount of phone calling work and being efficient in those particular races. This is the corniest line in the entire presentation, but it's absolutely true. Election day operations, EDO, doesn't work without LIOU. You guys are the poll challengers. You enable us to do everything we do on election day, and for that we're immensely grateful. Paper poll books will look something like this. You'll receive them via email. There'll be a link that you'll click. They'll download it as an Excel file. You'll open Excel and then print those. They're typically 40 to 60 pages. You can take those with you. We encourage everyone to print their paper poll book in the event that they don't have cell phone signal or for whatever reason their phone dies. Again, print that paper poll book and take it with you. You'll mark voters off as they vote in the voted column, and then you'll call in every 2 hours. And in the email that you get a little bit later this week, they will have a call-in schedule for you. So you'll call that number on the credential. You'll give your precinct, you'll report the names, and then you'll line them out on your poll sheet while once you've reported, so that you don't have to repeat the same names over and over again. Let's talk a little bit about the EDO app, and then again we'll go into questions. The MIGOP EDO app was built in 2011 and was tested for the first time in 2012. It is tested. We've used it in every election cycle since 2012 and in the 2012 elections. It is GOP data center integrated, so your efforts help everybody from the top of the ticket at Donald Trump all the way down to your local candidates. They can all take advantage of that data in near real time. It is scalable with a redundant paper backup. We have a tremendous amount of confidence in the system just from having used it so often. And it does include both Android and iPhone flavors, so you can download that app to your smartphone. Now, what does it do? It collects data in real time. It allows for immediate use of poll data, and it standardizes reporting while tracking voter participation. So as you click people off in the app, or if you as you call them in, we will remove those folks in real time from both our walk and call universes. Again, it allows us to track voter participation in key areas across the state, and then standardizes reporting. Now, downloading the app, you can't find it on the Play Store and you can't find it on the App Store. The only place you can get it is migop.org/EDO. Again, migop.org/EDO. There's a link on that page that you'll click right up at the top. It says click here to download the EDO app. It'll take you to a page where it'll give you both iPhone and Android options. This must be done on your cell phone. It cannot be done on your computer. So make sure that you head there on your cell phone to download the app. Now, for those of you with an iPhone, you probably got a reminder today. If you have an iPhone, you're going to want to employ the iPhone fix, because we don't distribute to the App Store. Steve Jobs and the good folks at Apple make us go through an additional step. So you go through the settings, the general, and then device management. You'll click on the Michigan Republican State Committee. You'll click on Trust the Michigan Republican State Committee, and then you'll click on Trust again. This only has to be done once. So when you download the app, you will have to open it. It will generally tell you that the developer is untrusted, and then you'll employ this fix, and then it will be taken care of for the rest of the election cycle. So I encourage you guys to do this either tonight or in the coming days to make sure you are all set to go for election day. Now, logging in. After downloading the app, you'll want to open it. You'll enter your last name and a PIN. This information will be sent to you via email in the coming days. You should get the first draft of that likely tomorrow. We are finishing up the last of the paper poll books. Want to make sure we get you all the information at the same time, and then create those accounts. So in the meantime, you can use the training credentials with last name or username training and pin 0101 to get inside the app and get yourself familiar with it. Again, training and then 0101 is a training app. The site to download is www.migop.org/EDO. Again, migop.org/EDO. Again, we will answer questions just as soon as we get through the presentation. Just a couple more minutes, folks, and I will make sure that all your questions get answered. The app is based around the navigation bar. There are 4 different modules: the voter list, observation, report, and resources. Now, the voter list is where you're going to spend most of your time. That's where you're going to check your voters off. The observations tab is the one that's on the screen. Open a precinct you do at the beginning of the day, close a precinct you do at the end of the day, and if there's any provisional ballots or anything to report in the middle of the day, you'll click throughout the day. And it will have a series of various pieces of information in each of those areas that we'll want you to collect. Make sure that you fill it out thoroughly, because as I said earlier, it is wizard style, so it will require you to make sure that you enter all the information. So if there are 2 tabulators, make sure you enter 2 tabulator serial numbers, so on and so forth. The reports tab is where any suspicious behavior gets reported. So if you have a situation where someone is not asking for IDs, or you have a challenged ballot, or there's voter intimidation going on, not with our folks, obviously, but if there's any voter intimidation that's happening, we want you to report that through the app, and you do that by clicking the report tab. The resources tab is your source for process information. Now, I would use that training login and 0101 for the PIN to log in and to read through some of the resources, because there really are phenomenal resources from the Secretary of State's site that are embedded into the app and allow you to download and read through in advance of Election Day. Again, that username is training and the PIN is 0101. The voter list module looks a bit like this. In the top left corner in the white box, you will see the voter name search function. This is the best way to find voters within the app. It is light years faster than scrolling through all of the folks to find the right last name. Now, if you type in James, you're going to get everybody with the first name Jim, as well as anybody with the last name Jameson. It searches both first and last names. So use that search function as much as you possibly can. Household members, if a household comes to vote together, husband, wife, voter age children, mother-in-law, that sort of thing, if you see a group of voters, click the household members button. It'll bring everybody up who lives in that household. Might save you some time. Reports, you can actually launch a report directly from this screen. So say if Jeffrey Adams, who is right down here, is a challenged voter, you can actually click that little report tab and launch the report section and pre-populate the information for you for that particular voter. Now, this green area with the blank checkboxes, that's where you're going to click when somebody votes. So if somebody comes in to vote, you'll click and check on them, and then that information will be sent to us. The observations tab, again, pretty straightforward. If you're opening a precinct, open the precinct in the app. When you close a precinct, close a precinct, or close the precinct. And then throughout the day is for if there's provisional ballots or any other types of things that happen throughout the day that you will need to record. Reports, again, if you're going to challenge a ballot, which is rare, again, those 4 statutory instances, you want to click challenge a ballot and then click and follow the process. You'll sign with your finger. Same thing with reports. If you have voter fraud or intimidation, human error, machine breakdowns, all of those things can be reported and should be reported through the report section. You'll click the type of report that's most applicable, or other in the case that it's not listed. You'll record your statement and a third-party statement if possible. Again, that's someone else who witnessed the same thing you did. That's not often possible because in a lot of instances it is you can't talk to voters, so you would have to get a poll worker's statement if possible. But at minimum, get your statement and then sign with your finger. After filing a report, always call the hotline. If it was important enough to file a report, it's important enough to give us a call about it. So we want to know anytime that any of these things happen. So if you use the reports module, make sure you give us a call and give us a heads up. The EO Resources tab is a great place for you. It's taken directly from the Secretary of State's website, and it's organized by topic. You can review before Election Day and call your local field organizer with questions. Printed versions of these documents are available on the Secretary of State's website in their publications section. Or if you have the ability to print from your phone, you can download the PDFs and print directly from there. I would spend some time, review these before Election Day, just to brush up on the process. I will go through and as people are typing additional questions, I'm going to start at the top. I'll read the questions and then go answer them. In closing, again, I can't thank you guys enough. You really will be the difference on November 8th. A lot of folks, including our from the chair of the building, Ronald Romney McDaniel, all the way to our field staff who interact with you on the ground, have been fighting hard for almost 2 years to bring this election about, and we're within sight, and we're in sight of pushing this over the line. So again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much for all that you do. We will keep fighting to win this election. We'll keep fighting all the way through Election Day, and with a little bit of luck and a whole lot of hard work, we'll make this thing successful. Let me go up to the top of your questions, and we will roll through. All right. How many election instruction posters are there? Frankly, I believe there are only one, but I'll have to get an answer for you on that. I believe it's just one poster or one set of posters, but I will get an answer. Please email me. Just hit reply on the invitation and send me that question. I will look it up and find out for you. Does in line mean what it says, or does it mean in the door, as one precinct captain told me? In line means in line. If the line is out the door, the line's out the door. Anyone who is in line at 8 p.m. has the ability to vote. Does that mean high school ID if they're 18? What to use ID? School ID, I believe it's just university ID, but I will double check on that. Matt, send me a quick email on that, and I will find an answer to your question. I don't want to give you the wrong information. The voter's name is not in the poll book, but the township clerk by phone verifies that he should be. Hold on one sec. I lost my place. Should a challenge be made? If the voter's name is not in the poll book, but the township clerk by phone verifies that he should be, should a challenge be made? In that instance, there are a couple of charts, and we have one of them a little bit earlier. If they are not in the poll book, they're generally going to vote by provisional ballot. Let me bring up that chart. Photo identification at the polls. There is another chart here that I don't have with me this evening. If they verify that it is a mistake, they will likely go through the provisional ballot process. They would likely have to identify that they have a photo ID that matches and also some proof of residency. Long story short, if there's a situation where they're not in the poll book, they're verified by the clerk, there is going to be some additional work beyond the normal issuing of a ballot. So if that's happening or happening on a routine basis, you're going to want to let us know and give us a call. Is student ID from a private school acceptable? That is another good question. If we go back to the slide, it says student ID card from a higher education institution. So I would, as a plain reading of that would state that a private higher education institution would be fine. Again, I can double check on that, Carrie. Does campaigning, including wearing a shirt or hat with a campaign slogan that does not mention the candidate or party, I'm with her, that would be considered campaigning in the polling location? I would say that really any reference to a candidate or party would be considered grounds to challenge that process for campaigning in a polling location. Does the closing poll challenger have to stay until all is closed down, or they can leave after the last voter votes? Jessica, we want you to stay until the tapes have been printed and signed so that you can report results. My app does not take my PIN number. Matthew Rockwell, your you have not been assigned a PIN number that I'm aware of just yet. We will be assigning those in the next day or so, and you will get an email with that information in it. Carolyn McDonald, I don't have a smartphone and will be using paper record. Will you cover this? Yes. You'll be emailed a paper poll book, print that out. You might want to print 2 copies with you, or 2 copies. You can take that information with you, check off who has voted as they vote, and either highlight or line them out as you call them in every 2 hours. There will be instructions on the times to report paper poll books included in the email that gets sent to you. Jim Anton, I strongly suggest everyone do at least 2 training sessions. This is my 2nd time, and I'm picking up more than the first time. Thanks, Jim. We do cover a lot of information fairly quickly. I want to be cognizant of your guys' time. But yes, please feel free to attend the training session multiple times. Christopher, if you never had audio, you can click the speaker icon at the top or the phone icon if you're attending on the app, and it will give you audio, or use the phone number dial-in information to get audio. Can we download this presentation? Notes on this presentation will be sent to you as well as the information about where you're poll challenging. The full presentation we do not send around because it's kind of cumbersome to take with you. We send a consolidated version so that you have all of the information that you'll need on election day. Kathy, this is a lot. Yes, it absolutely is, but you guys are more than capable of doing it. There's a lot of information to cover in a short period of time. No one is going to be perfect at this, but the mere fact that you are in a polling location is going to bring sunshine and transparency to this process, and the very fact that you're there is going to help guarantee that this election is done in a way that ballot integrity is preserved. I'm from Genesee County. I need to know special rules for Genesee County. Donna, I really appreciate that. We'll make sure that you get that information. We'll be having trainings Friday and Monday for those who are going to be in AB account boards, and you'll be emailed with that information. Kathy, what is the hotline number? The hotline number is actually on your credentials. It will be sent to you. Also, within the app, there is a phone icon. You can click that at any point, and that will give you the number. Matthew Rockwell, I am in Saline, so we only have 2-place church and school with 4 stations receiving voter sign-in. How is one person supposed to monitor who's voted? You can have one person per precinct. So if there are multiple precincts voting in a location, you can have multiple people there. You can actually have up to 2 people as challengers in a polling location. Long story short, guys, there are more voters that are going to come through than we're going to be able to check off. I want you guys to not fret about missing voters here and there. Try and get as many as you possibly can, because anybody you check off is one less person that we have to call. But realize that it's probably going to happen that we miss some folks, and that's okay. The people in here in Saline can't leave. If you're working at an AB count board, that's absolutely correct. You were sequestered and can't leave until polls close at 8 p.m. But if you're working a regular polling location, you should be able to leave throughout the day. If that is not the case, call the hotline, let us know. What is the fax number for sending in results on paper? We'd actually prefer that you call in those results because they get in a little bit more quickly that way. I realize that that's maybe not the easiest thing. But if you can step out of the polling location, make the phone call those folks in every couple of hours. It is a short period of time, and it's actually going to expedite us getting them into the computer because we have results operators standing by. That said, for anybody who is interested, our fax number is 517-487-0090. What's the site to download again? We talked about this a little bit earlier. Michigan Republican Party. It's migop.org/EO. Don, it's okay that your wife and you have the same last name. You'll have different pins, which will key you into different accounts. Can I use my iPhone in Genesee County? If you are in a polling location in Genesee County, absolutely. If you are in an AB count board, they are going to take your phone. In the event that you are in an AB count board, and again, we'll cover this in the AB count board training, you want to, if you have a question or something is not being done correctly, you'll want to approach the poll captain, ask them to use their phone, and invite them to monitor you while you make a call. That is the guidance we received from the Secretary of State's office. Now, the link to sign up is not working for me. How do I sign up to choose location and hours to work? Colleen, get in touch with your local field rep. They will place you, or send me an email and I can forward that to the field staffer in the area that is closest to you. Suzanne, thank you. Anthony Russo, my phone is supplied by my employer and I'm unable to download any apps. Does this make it impossible for me to be a poll challenger? Absolutely not. You can use the paper version. It's going to be a little bit less efficient, both for you and for us, but that's okay. We want to make sure that everybody can participate. Apparently, my name isn't recorded in the system because I had to call at the last minute. My name is Barbara Hart. Barbara, shoot me a quick email at amarkwart@migop.org, and we'll get you taken care of. What if you see someone you know and they talk to me? I would address the poll captain that's there and let them know. Again, if somebody asks you what you're doing, again, direct them to the poll captain. If you see someone that you know and they want to talk to you, I would wait until after they vote and then step outside to talk to them. Do we have to go outside to call the hotline, or are we supposed to stay and keep watching, marking off voters? If you're going to make a phone call, step out of the polling location. We do not want to be accused in any way, size, shape, or form of interfering with the voting process. So if you have to make a phone call to us, step outside. Do I have to show captains any of the material I bring with me? Jim, technically no, but I don't see a reason why you wouldn't show the captains the materials you bring with you. There's nothing secret about the poll list that we send. There's nothing secret about the Secretary of State's documents that you can print from your app. I wouldn't have any problem with you showing them anything. We're absolutely 100% within the law, and we are there to help these folks make sure that the election is conducted in a way that everybody has confidence in. So I would have no problems with you showing any material. At the end of the night, will the paper ballots be collected so that they can be counted and compared with the final tally sheet printed out by the machine? John, all of the paper ballots are collected inside of the machines. They are then put into bags and stored in the event that there is a recount, and that is where the tickets would be compared to make sure. Now, the information that's collected, the information on the ticket sheets is actually verified by those bags going back. There's unofficial results that are available that night, and then there's what's called the canvas, where they make sure and they reconcile everything. That process will be completed in the days and weeks following before the certification of the election. Are there directions for using the app? Yes, you will be sent information. You'll be sent information on using the app with the different screens, part of the instructions you received this evening via the training. I hope that you have a good confidence with it. It's pretty straightforward and easy to use. Again, use those training credentials to log in and to see kind of how the app works. If I start in the afternoon, do I click on throughout the day to sign into the app and then hit close the poll when done? David, if you're going to use throughout the day if there's a provisional ballot or something of that nature that comes up, that's when you use throughout the day. But then close the poll when it's done. Absolutely. You'll go to hit close the poll when the tickets have been printed and the poll is closed. Ruth Weiser, having trouble loading app on iPhone. Please review. We've got that information again that popped up. I can bring that screen up for you guys for anybody who's got an iPhone, and I'll leave that on the screen for you. The phone app is not working under training 1010, giving an error code. John, it's training and 0101. I think that's probably why it's throwing that error. What is the website for the SOS for resources? If you just go to the Secretary of State's website and go under elections or information for election, or go to elections, and then on the left-hand side, it is election information for election administrators. There is a ton of resources, including videos, that you can review in advance of going into a polling location. Do you have a phone number I can call you? Matthew, I can. Do me a favor, type your phone number and I will call you after the call. What is the PIN for the app login? It's 0101. Thanks, Shelly. I really appreciate it. Can I wear jeans and a nice top, not a t-shirt to work in on election day? Absolutely. You don't have to do Sunday best. I wouldn't head in sweatpants, but there's nothing stopping you from doing so. Business casual is generally a pretty safe way to go. Can you take a picture of anything strange? Absolutely not. Cameras are not allowed in polling locations. We should not have any poll challengers taking pictures of anything. What if someone says, I voted absentee? but I changed my mind. That person would have to spoil out the ballot, and there'd be additional procedures for that to happen. There is some specific guidance on that particular topic. I don't have that material right in front of me, Don. If that is a situation, chances are they're going to pull the person off to the side, but they will have to go through a process of spoiling that original ballot before they would be allowed to vote. John Hoos, there's a cell phone number. Okay. I was late because it's not 7 p.m. here. I live in Ironwood. Also, I was never able to get any sound through the page tested good for sound. I did follow along and read everything after I entered around 7:20 your time. Cindy, the information that we sent around said 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I apologize if there was a disconnect there. If you would like to call me, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. When do we get our credentials? Suzanne, you'll get your credentials within the next 24 hours. If you apply for an absentee ballot but do not mail it, can they vote in person? There's a process. They actually sign an affidavit that states that they didn't receive their absentee ballot or it's been destroyed. You have to actually sign an affidavit, and then they will allow you to vote in person. How strict to be on Clinton shirt, for example? Any political T-shirts are campaigning in a polling place. Bring it to the attention of the election inspector. If they don't address it, call us. What counties are you looking for volunteers to be in absentee voter count boards? Specifically, Wes, that's a great question. Genesee County is a primary area of concern for us, as well as the city of Detroit and some areas in Wayne County. We also need folks in Pontiac and some of the other AB count boards. If there are volunteers out there who would like to go to AB count boards, we're happy to place them or connect them to a place that they could sit in all day. Now, a reminder, absentee count boards, you are sequestered. So if the absentee count boards start at 7 a.m., you're going to be there for 13 hours. So I don't mean to disincentivize anybody. I do appreciate everybody's commitment, but that is something that you need to know. I wouldn't want anybody to walk into an AB count board not knowing that, and then they cannot leave under Michigan election law until the polls close. Trying to register at myteam.mig.org, and it says I'm not registered even though I am registered. It's not myteam.migop.org. It's migop.org/EDO. So that's a good spot to go. If we do have a smartphone, do we still want to print paper copies, even if we have a spare battery? Yes, Sue, print the paper. God knows what could happen on election day. You just want to make sure you've got that paper backup just in case. Travis Hebert, I need your email again. Travis, I will follow up after the presentation so that I can email you. I'm actually going to copy your email right now. Are we going to get some type of official credentials, something that we must display to show we are valid and legit? Absolutely. You will get credentials from the Michigan Republican Party. They will be sent to you via email, and you can show them to let them know that you are a valid poll challenger. Will there be Democrat poll challengers also? Quite possibly. Democrats are allowed 2 poll challengers per location, just like we are. They're just there to make sure that the election integrity is upheld just like we are. They just happen to work for the other team. Can I bring my husband with me? If so, does he or she need to go through training? Tricia, absolutely. We want to make sure if you want to do it with your husband, you're more than welcome to, but he would need to go through training to get credentialed through us. Do we introduce ourselves as a poll challenger, and do we have to specify GOP? Linda, I would. Introduce yourself as a poll challenger. My name's Linda. I'm a poll challenger. I'm credentialed through the Michigan Republican Party. Just want to introduce myself. Again, be friendly. These folks are doing their job on election day just like you are. Alan Templin, we talked about this. Are there both GOP and Dem challengers? There may be. How many GOO challengers will be with me? Sandra, we have scheduled one. Oh, GOP challengers will be with me. There's 2 challengers per party, except in AB count boards where there are 1. We have scheduled it so that you will likely be the only GOP challenger there unless the county party has credentialed folks as well, which is very, very rare. Pam Smith, I know there are a lot of locations are having 2 EPBs for this election, so we really have to work fast. Electronic poll books for this election.